on October the 18th of 2020. Julie De La Garza was a passenger in a truck driven by her boyfriend down Northwest Freeway near Spring Cypress, Texas. As reported by the Harris County Sheriff's Office, they were spotted in traffic by De La Garza's ex-boyfriend, Man Austin Hayes. He began following them and eventually pulled up behind their vehicle. Hayes fired at the couple through the back window of the truck, and a bullet struck 20-year-old De La Garza in the head. The authorities initially believed that the shooting had been a road rage incident. Photos from the scene shared by the Cy-Fair Fire Department showed the area being taped off as first responders tended to De La Garza. She was rushed to an ER clinic from which she was taken to Memorial Hermann Hospital by Life Flight in critical condition. The following day, De La Garza's family announced that she'd succumbed to her injuries. By the time that the authorities arrived on location, Hayes had abandoned his white Toyota in a parking lot and fled on foot. A manhunt was launched and he surrendered to the police within days of the shooting. His initial charges of aggravated assault were upgraded to murder. His bail was set at $250,000 after a judge discovered that Hayes was on probation for an assault that had occurred in March of that same year. Hayes had strict release conditions upon his bail being secured. They included being GPS monitored, adhering to a curfew, surrendering his passport, and having no contact with the victim's family or boyfriend. Number 6. Zoe Hopkins. Welsh woman Zoe Hopkins was jailed for 18 months in the summer of 2022 after brutally attacking a female acquaintance out of jealous rage. The 36-year-old, who was reported as being intoxicated at the time, waited for the victim to return to her Carmarthen apartment complex on February the 15th of that year. Hopkins followed her to the block's communal area, tackled her from behind and threw her to the ground. She then grabbed the unnamed 28-year-old victim's head and repeatedly smashed it against some steps. The woman was able to get away, but Hopkins chased her down to her flat and launched another attack. While holding the victim by her hair, Hopkins kicked her in the head and accused her of texting her boyfriend. The battered woman was eventually able to escape to a neighbor's apartment and called the police. She had been left with a number of injuries in the form of bruises and cuts, but opted not to seek medical help. Hopkins was arrested and a few months later pleaded guilty to assault occasioning actual bodily harm. She had over a dozen prior convictions, a number of which were for violence, with the most recent being a 2019 battery charge. Number 5. Alawia Kowalski. In June of 2018, Alawia Kowalski and her boyfriend, Nigel Simper, were on a Great Western Railway train from Cheltenham to London Paddington. The train had barely departed when the couple started arguing and were approached by a worker who asked if they were all right and who was told by Simper that they were not. Later on in their trip, Simper was seen shouting and bleeding from a 2-inch laceration to his forehead. It would emerge that Kowalski had thrown a bottle of Desperado's beer at her boyfriend's head because he'd been talking to his ex on the phone. As blood started pouring on his face, Simper reportedly told his partner, "What have you done? You bottled me. You will do time for this." The woman was arrested and charged with assault, occasioning actual bodily harm. She subsequently admitted throwing the bottle during her trial, but claimed to have done so in self-defense. Kowalski reported that Simper was disrespecting her while loudly talking on the phone with his ex-girlfriend. The woman told the court, "He was laughing at my face, telling her that I am stupid." She claimed that she tried to take the phone away from Simper, who then punched her with the heel of his hand. Kowalski also stated that her boyfriend, whom she accused of having taken cocaine at the time, kicked her when she tried to get up, which ultimately prompted her to hit him with the bottle. The woman's trial was still ongoing, according to subsequent information released to the media. Number 4. Chantelle Connolly. A former star of the British reality TV series Geordie Shore was convicted in the summer of 2017 of punching a woman outside a Newcastle nightclub. Chantelle Connolly and the victim had reportedly met in the VIP area of a bar called Bijou in October of the previous year. They were part of a larger group, and the 22-year-old unnamed woman had recognized Connolly from the show, of which she'd reportedly been an avid watcher. After chatting and dancing together, the group moved to another venue on Stowell Street. While there, 27-year-old Connolly became jealous over a relationship she believed the woman had had with her ex-boyfriend, Tommy Sayers. The former reality star repeatedly asked if she'd gone with Tommy. It would emerge that the victim did know the man, but hadn't seen him since her late teens. Bouncers reportedly intervened in the dispute and the woman walked away with 2 of her friends. Later on, before they could get into the Powerhouse nightclub, they were met outside by Connolly, who demanded to see her phone and check for proof that there was nothing going on between her and Sayers. Connolly found nothing to confirm her suspicions. Nevertheless, as the other woman headed towards a taxi, she charged and punched her in the face. The victim was knocked backwards and fell to the pavement. She was left with a broken wrist and a split lip that required stitches to mend. Connolly was arrested and vehemently denied the assault, claiming she hadn't been anywhere near the nightclub where the attack had occurred. The victim's version of events was ultimately accepted by the court, and Connolly was found guilty of grievous bodily harm. She was ordered to pay the plaintiff £2,500 in addition to being given a 12-month community order and 200 hours of unpaid work. Number 3. Leah Hanlon. On November the 26th of 2022, Leah Hanlon, aged 23, invited her ex-boyfriend to her home in the suburb of Cathays, in the Welsh capital of Cardiff. They'd been separated for 7 weeks, and Hanlon had grown angry, thinking her former partner had been talking to other women. The man showed her his phone to attest that he hadn't done so, but in a fit of jealous rage, Hanlon successively struck him in the head with a bottle of Smirnoff Ice and an ashtray, both of which shattered on impact. The woman then followed her ex as he fled to a neighbor's downstairs apartment. She stabbed him with a knife under his right armpit. The blade punctured his chest cavity and the victim suffered a collapsed lung. He was rushed to the hospital where his chest was drained so that the damage to his lung could be mended. The man suffered life-threatening compression to the heart, windpipe, and major blood vessels, but eventually fully recovered. Following her arrest, Hanlon pleaded guilty to wounding and was sent to prison for 15 months. Number 2. Aaron Williams. On March the 23rd of 2019, Jessica Gittins was a maid of honor at her sister's wedding in Newport, Wales. Accompanying her was her boyfriend, Aaron Williams, who was reported to have been drinking heavily during the event. Upon returning to the home of Gittins' mother in Aberbargod, Williams accused his partner of flirting with other men during the reception. The couple, both in their early 20s at the time, were still in the clothes they'd worn at the wedding when Williams savagely beat his partner during what was reported as a 90-minute ordeal. The man repeatedly kicked Gittins in the hips, which he reportedly knew were fragile as she'd had multiple operations after dislocating them as a child. Looking back on the attack, Gittins would remember begging him to stop, but Williams wouldn't relent. The man, whom she described as being in a demonic state, stomped on her head with such force that her tooth was chipped and she was left with shoe prints on her face. He then threw a lava lamp at her head, struck her in the rib area, and pulled out a clump of her hair. After the prolonged assault that caused Gittins to fear for her life, Williams apologized, said he loved her, and tried to take her away in a taxi so that her family wouldn't see what had happened. The woman refused, and she was later taken to a hospital with a jaw injury as well as multiple cuts and bruises across her body. Williams was arrested and tried to claim that he'd acted in self-defense because Gittins had tried to scratch him. During his trial, he admitted causing actual bodily harm and was handed a suspended sentence as well as a restraining order in June of 2020. However, in the years that followed the incident, Williams repeatedly violated the restraining order through several incidents. They included calling the woman from an unknown number and adopting an accent in a failed attempt of disguising his voice. Stalking her and sitting across from her on the train. Williams pleaded guilty to multiple counts of breaching the order in 2023, but was spared jail time once more, as the judge deemed there was still hope for him to be rehabilitated. We have several more cases from a previous release lined up for you right after number 1. Stay tuned if you'd like. Number 1. Alicia Oakley. Reese Tyler, Alicia Oakley, and several of their friends were drinking together at an apartment in Dover, England in October of 2018. At some point during the evening, Oakley tried to kiss Tyler, but he reportedly spurned her advances. The man ended up sleeping with another woman from the party in a nearby room. Overcome with jealous rage, 19-year-old Oakley then charged Tyler and plunged a knife into the back of his head. The blade missed his brain by less than an inch. The man was taken to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother Hospital in Margate, where his scalp wound was treated with surgical glue. Oakley was arrested and underwent a mental health evaluation, during the course of which she was diagnosed with emotional instability disorder. In 2022, she pleaded guilty to wounding with intent, and the judge agreed with the conclusion of mental health experts, who determined that she'd suffered a psychotic episode at the time of the attack on Tyler. She was spared jail time and instead given a 2-year jail sentence, suspended for 18 months. Tyler subsequently stated that the sentence had been too lenient. He reported that psychological trauma from the knife attack had left him with anxiety around women and that he still suffered from dizziness that affected his work and ability to play with his daughter. Number 7. Michael Lawson. In 2018, 29-year-old Sarah Bramley broke up with her partner David Saunders and started dating someone new. Despite their relationship being over, Bramley reveled in the attention of both men and continued contact with Saunders in what can only be described as a love-hate relationship, with messages exchanged between them ranging from caring to downright personal abuse. Eventually, the toxic communication was taken too far when on July the 1st, after hours of furious texting, Bramley sent an explicit photo of her and her new lover, Michael Lawson, to Saunders. Scared that he would be enraged by the photo and come find her, Bramley then forced Lawson onto the street and locked herself in her home. The event unfolded as she'd expected, and Saunders had immediately grabbed a taxi to their location and went after Lawson. After a short chase, he killed him in cold blood with a single stab wound straight to his heart. Saunders was caught and pled guilty to murder. While he was sentenced to 22.5 years in prison, for his part, the court considered that Bramley had also played a role in the violent crime. On top of initiating an act she knew would enrage Saunders, as well as locking Lawson out, the court heard how she egged Saunders on by saying, "Feel free to smack him," after sending him an explicit photo. Bramley pleaded guilty to inciting or assisting in the murder of Michael Lawson and was given 4 months in jail. Number 6. Sean Dyson and Lucy Ann Rushton. Mother of 5 Lucy Ann Rushton was murdered by her husband, Sean Dyson, in June of 2019, after the man went into a jealous rage. Together for 4 years before getting married in 2010, the couple had recently split, with Rushton trying to finally put behind her what had been a toxic and violent relationship. The downward spiral of events started late in the evening on June the 22nd, when Rushton received a phone call from an ex-lover, which enraged Dyson. A child in the home at the time reported that Dyson told Rushton to swallow her ring because they were no longer together, and was woken up in the middle of the night to the sound of him beating her. The brutal and prolonged attack consisted of Dyson stomping, kicking and jumping on Rushton as she lay defenseless and half naked on her back. After calling the police in the early hours of June the 23rd, he disappeared for the next 10 hours and let paramedics find her lifeless body on the bed in her home in Hampshire, UK. Dyson went on to message police, family and friends to say that she died of drowning after he'd thrown water on her, but an autopsy revealed Rushton had a broken sternum, 2 collapsed lungs, and 37 fractures on her ribs. He was found later hiding in a cupboard and was charged with her murder. 2 weeks into his trial, he admitted guilt and was sentenced to a minimum of 17 years behind bars. Number 5. Keith Rizzo and Naomi Smith. Described as jealous and possessive by the judge presiding over his trial, 23-year-old Keith Rizzo was sentenced to 22 years in jail for brutally murdering his girlfriend, Naomi Smith, who had danced with another man at a pub night out. When the pair had started dating in early 2019, Rizzo already had a domestic violence conviction from an ex and continued down the same path with Smith, according to reports. A week before her murder, she confessed to a friend that he had choked her until she passed out and that he had broken and thrown things at her in the past. The night of the murder, a group of friends, including the couple, had gone down to a pub. Eyewitness reports stated that the night turned sour when Rizzo smashed a table worth of glasses and stormed out after spotting Smith dancing briefly with another man. Assuring a friend there that she'd be safe to go home, she went back to their shared apartment alone, only for Rizzo to show up later and break down the door. He played out his horrific attack with 2 knives, which he used to stab her 32 times, along with choking her and inflicting dozens of blows. The crime scene was described by paramedics like a horror film had taken place, as the carnage covered the entire kitchen. Immediately, Rizzo claimed 2 mysterious men had broken in and killed Smith over owed money while he was in the shower. The defense was questionable at best. CCTV failed to show anyone matching their description entering the building, and a number of women came forward to give evidence of his abusive behavior. Even a month after his conviction, a member of his defense team claimed that he still does not accept playing any part in her murder. Number 4. Sammy Lee Langford. A disturbing love triangle between a mother, her ex, and her daughter led to a gruesome murder in Swansea, South Wales, in 2019. After he was released from prison in 2015 for previously stabbing someone, Jason Farrell and Sarah Lodwig started an on-again, off-again relationship that ultimately didn't last. Unwilling to leave the family, the 49-year-old man began seeing Sarah's daughter, Sammy Lee, whom Farrell had known since she was a young schoolgirl. Despite seemingly having moved on with her younger counterpart, when Sarah got a new partner, Farrell spiraled into a jealous rage and attacked the man with a wooden pole. His rage unquenched by the attack, he then turned on 22-year-old Sammy Lee. He tied her up in his flat and proceeded to stab her face, throat, and chest 22 times. Before fleeing the scene, she died just 20 to 30 minutes before paramedics arrived to find her mutilated body covered by a duvet. Arrested later by armed police, Farrell asked for a pen and paper in which he chillingly confessed to having sliced her up. Even though he'd given a signed confession corroborated by physical evidence at his trial, Farrell pleaded not guilty on the basis that he'd been desensitized to violence after spending years in prison. The defense swayed neither the judge nor the jury, and Farrell was given a life sentence with a minimum of 26 years behind bars. Number 3. Carrie Farver and Shanna Golia. In 2012, Dave Cooper moved to Omaha, Nebraska for work and started casually dating Shanna Liz Golia, whom he'd met online. After leaving a long-term relationship prior to his move, he made it clear he didn't want to be exclusive, which wasn't an issue until 6 months later when he met Carrie Farver. The two got along really well, but mutually decided to keep it casual until only a few weeks down the line, Cooper received a breakup text from her number. She was reported missing a few days later by her mother. After last seen leaving his house by Golia, the case went cold, but to everyone's surprise, her Facebook page was still active. For the next 4 years, Cooper would be continuously harassed by Farver, receiving 60-plus texts and 100-plus emails a day, despite him changing his number multiple times. Golia, who he'd continued to see on occasion, also received messages, as well as Farver's mother and his ex, but still, no one had seen or even heard her voice. Threatening messages turned to vandalism when Cooper's work was targeted and Golia's house was burned down, killing her family pets. Golia had told police she suspected it was Farver, but the case remained cold until 2015, when a new team of investigators volunteered to take it on. Their investigation and intuition soon pointed them to Golia, and using IP addresses and cell phone data, they discovered she had upwards of 30 fake emails using Farver's name and had a messaging app that allowed her to schedule future texts. The amount was shocking, with Golia likely spending 40 to 50 hours a week impersonating Farver and stalking her contacts. In the end, despite graphic detailing of the murder by Golia pretending to be someone else over email, no body nor any murder weapon was ever discovered. Golia was still found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison in 2017, 5 years after it all began. Number 2. Angelique Sutton. In 2015, 24-year-old Ashley Wade wanted a child so badly that she contrived a fake pregnancy and committed to convincing friends, family, and her boyfriend. Posting about it to social media, she reconnected with her former friend, Angelique Sutton, who was also pregnant at the time. They bonded over their pregnancies, and Wade invited Sutton over on November the 20th to give her a gift for her wedding, which was later that day. But the seemingly innocent invitation was actually a ruse, as Wade was jealous of Sutton's baby and wanted it for herself. Upon her arrival, Wade attacked Sutton, slashing her larynx so she couldn't scream before stabbing her face and neck upwards of 50 times. Keeping the injuries from the neck up, Wade then went for her abdomen and cut her baby out using a paring knife. Once in her arms, she wrapped it up, fed it formula, and pretended as though she had just given birth. Sutton bled out and Wade was immediately caught. In statements made by Wade in the aftermath, she claimed to truly believe that the baby once in her arms was hers and that she'd rescued it after her own imagined baby had died. The calculated attack by Wade and precise extraction kept baby Genesis alive. In a trial that lasted almost 2 weeks, she was convicted of second-degree murder and kidnapping and received a 40-year sentence. Number 1. Jonathan Amaro. suspecting his wife Brittany of having an affair. After going through her phone in September of 2020, Armando Barron from New Hampshire, US, went on a jealous rampage. First choking out his wife until she passed out, he proceeded to lure her suspected lover, Jonathan Amaro, to a park, where he violently attacked him. Barron forced his wife to cut his wrists before fatally shooting him in the back of his car. Amaro's body was then taken to a campsite, where Barron allegedly forced his wife at gunpoint to decapitate the body before wrapping it in a tarp and hiding it. Amaro's body and Brittany were found together at the campsite by police when both failed to show up at work. Working with police, Brittany, her face covered with bruises, confessed to the gruesome chain of events. Armando was charged with capital murder and kidnapping, which carried a life sentence without parole, while his wife was indicted on 3 counts of falsifying physical evidence. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be wrongfully accused of cheating on your partner or rightfully accused of cheating on your taxes? Let us know in the comments section below.